Awesome. But that's good. Yeah, it's good to kind of embrace that bouncing around. It's every time I'm learning a new build, and I learn a lot quicker because I've got a lot of experience, right? But even for me, like if I drastically change a style, so sometimes I will play mech in one matchup, and so different from playing bio. And whenever I swap from bio to mech in a matchup, I'm always like, okay, maybe I was 5400 MMR. I'm going to be 5100 MMR for a few weeks until I can really get enough experience, because there's just going to be so many basic things that I'm just making mistakes with because it's very different style, right? That I don't have nearly as much experience with. And these days I've played more mech, so it doesn't take me as long. It's not as big a drop. I can, carry over some of the experience. But when I was first doing it, because I'd only played bio, it was a massive, massive, massive drop. So, oh, there we go. I accidentally didn't have the audio source. Sorry, guys, in the stream. You can hear Pomba now.
Hello, guys. What's up? I hope they don't kill me because of the Mac.
Yep. It's all right. StarCraft players are always looking for something to judge you for. Oh, you don't use camera location hotkeys? You're so bad. But then they run into the GM player who doesn't, and is like twice as good as them, and then they cry themselves to sleep, and we all remember that we should probably put our egos away a little bit with this game.
They're saying I sound like Rainer because I'm Italian originally. I have the same accent. But I'm not as good, obviously.
Give it time. We'll get there. Awesome, man. All right. So obviously it was a few weeks since our last session. Just in terms of quickly doing a review, some of the big things that you changed was, well, first of all, did you end up setting up the control group stealing?
Yeah, that's what I did, actually. So I explain you very quickly. I watched the video you posted in the link. It was a coaching session with the Protoss player, remember?
Yeah.
And there, what I did is the following. I didn't fully implemented your alt. You switched control to alt, and then basically you remove the control group and you just make them all to control group stealing, right?
Yeah.
But instead, what I did is the following. I did the dump alt key, which is caps lock.
Yep.
And then only the control group number 3. What I did, I put the space bar, and the space bar is going to be basically the equivalent of control group stealing. So the space bar is alt 3, basically. And I use the space bar as my drop defense squad.
Ah, so you effectively have a dumping key, but you also have a very easy stealing key for splitting units onto. Ah, okay. Oh, I want to send 20 Zerglings to my main. You box them, press spacebar, send them to your main base.
Exactly. And the dumping is very useful if I do, for example, I know I have to, just counterattack and I will throw the units and I want micro them. I just caps lock, send them, and forget about it.
Beautiful. I love this system. I think it's great. That's really cool. I love that you took the time to watch the video. You thought about what made sense for you. Big thumbs up on that, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's helpful. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it's way better. Because the tab is so easy to feel it on your fingers.
Yeah.
So it's like, you have your thumb there all the time. So it's like very, very, very easy just to big ass button, right? And you don't have to think about it.
Hells yeah, man. So what about with the double clicking or control clicking instead of double clicking?
I'm trying, but I still have the reflex.
Still have the reflex, yeah. I mean, it's not going to hurt you too much, but definitely steadily trying to learn that. So that's something, you could try to revise some drills or something. I'd like us, because this is our second session, to get into something else and focus more on strategy and stuff and move us in that direction. In terms of, we'd mentioned how with idle worker, you can always control click the button. Have you used that mechanic at all?
Yes, I'm doing it.
Okay, awesome. Caps lock is dumping. You got your drop defense set up.
Yes.
All right.
Basically, what I do now is actually I have like an additional button on the mouse that is really easy accessible, and this is redirected to idle worker. So instead of pressing the button, sometimes I just Alt Control and then press the mouse, and then we'll select all the idle workers, so I can send them wherever I need.
Did you say Alt Control?
Control, no, Control, and then the button on the mouse.
Okay. Right. Cool. Awesome.
And so basically this is equivalent to pressing Control, keeping Control, and then clicking on the idle worker icon.
Is this sorry, just getting something else ready. Okay, cool. No, that should be great then. So mechanically, I think that's all good. So in terms of what we should cover today, do you have a specific matchup you're dragging your heels on, or you want to start working towards, or should we just focus on one matchup? Should we try to review all three matchups today? Do you have some replays you'd like to watch? Any plans, or do you want me to just kind of grab it and direct us?
If you have a suggestion, because we went through the mechanics, it's still hard, like especially against Bio. It's the harassment is crazy, especially if they go, for example, when they deviate the build, sometimes I have difficulties. For example, sometimes they open with Helion's Bio and then they go to mech at some point, so sometimes it's hard. Also,
no worries.
Because if you see, my matchup, you see, like against Terran and Zerg is dropping a lot lately.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, your ZvP is still kicking ass, so there's just no reason for us to talk about that until it starts to drop a little bit, right? Much more gains than the others. All right, cool. Well, do you want to just throw up a replay of a recent Zerg vs. Zerg or Zerg vs. Terran? And let's jump into some games and talk about some stuff.
Yeah, I have ZvT, but I have a good replay and it's still in Bio. But it's in the old version of the game, so I don't know if it's gonna create some problems watching the replay.
You can just send that to me on Discord, and then you'll have to just watch on the stream. There'll be a few seconds delay, but it should be fine. So if you go in your replays folder, you can see there is a show in folder button. That'll take you to your folder, and then you can just drag that over to our Discord call, and I can easily download it from there. Should be cool.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I'm going to the folder now.
No worries.
Need to find it because I renamed it, but I think.
So there's a player in chat who's wondering about control group stealing. Yep. Sorry. Continue.
So I can just drag it into the Discord. You said?
Yep. Into our direct call, and it should be fine.
Upload. It should be there now. Actually.
Yeah, got it.
So this is my kind of training buddy, and now it became a diamond 3 before it was a plat 1. So his level is a bit higher than mine. Just bear it in mind.
No worries. Not bad to train with someone a bit better than us. Always good to get a bit of that intense stuff going. And here we go. Okay, replay's on. So I want you to open the stream up. And if you already had the stream open, make sure you refresh it, because it'll be a bit behind otherwise.
Yeah, I'm going to refresh it because it's a bit behind. Yeah.
No worries. Okay, cool. So in terms of the build order, if we look at the last session, we talked a little bit about kind of rule of one gas. Talked a little bit about kind of doubling up workers at the start, just tightening up the build order. Yeah, and all of that stuff of getting up that gigantic economy. And the big thing we highlighted towards the end of that session was that we want to swap into controlling and dominating the map from 4 bases onwards. We want to focus on not going a hive or anything, but just kind of massing up units. Now, I'm trying to remember, was it Hydra Bane you were going for?
Link Hydra, yes, Hydra Bane. And in this map, with him, I told him, like, I'm going to do only layer tech. So the whole game, I stayed on layer tech, basically.
Cool.
Yeah. But eventually he killed me completely. But you will see.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of your opening build order, that's always one of the most important things for us to focus on as a player. So looking at the opening in this game, the biggest skill you can work on is your own analytical skills. So this is something we can carry across to all matchups, right? From all situations. So we're actually going to do a little bit of me breaking things down, but we're also going to try to encourage you to break things down as well. So
that sounds good. Sounds good.
That's something where it's honestly that, because you can, the building, it's like building a habit, right? It's building the practice of glancing back at our, because you're not live in the replay, I'll have to steer this a little bit more, but I'll try to ask you questions and stuff. But basically it's building the habit of constantly reviewing what we're doing. Even when we win games, double checking, how tight was my build, right? It's this never ending pursuit of, not everything's going to be perfect in StarCraft. We aim for perfection though. We aim to, shoot for the stars, land on the moon. We want to try to constantly make sure that, especially the opening, is getting tighter and tighter, right? Especially the early game. A lot of players, once they have any sort of rhythm down in the early game, they never look at it again. They say, this is how I play this matchup. And they want to look at the last thing that goes wrong in the game. That's where their attention gets drawn. It's, how do I beat these tanks? How do I beat this mass Thor? How do I beat these carriers? And that's the worst way to learn, because StarCraft is a game where you exponentially grow your economy from the start of the game, right? So if you can improve small things early on, it has huge effects later in the game. So rather than going to the last problem, we should always look at every loss and even every win as a situation where we could have been much further ahead if we tightened up a few things way earlier in the game. They could have put us in a much better position. So we're always hunting to improve and tighten up our opening as much as possible. So I'm going to break down this opening, and we're going to be doing a couple of rules. We're going to kind of write down, okay, what am I doing? And I'm already going to start writing some before I even do it. So the first thing is checking the build order, right? So if we know the build order really well, that's great. If you don't, you're going to have your build order open, on a second monitor or your phone, or written down on a piece of paper while you're kind of looking at the replay, right? So checking the build order will be really big. Something we can look at here is, okay, exact timings of everything, right? So did hatch go down right on 300 minerals? Did pool go down right on 200? Really, really, that sort of stuff. Third base timing, etc., etc. Lots of little details. What about just general macro? Okay, so what I mean by that is, if we go to the corner of the map, so we've got no distractions on screen, we bring up that units tab, go to 4x speed, and we're just going to watch for idle lava sitting in that production tab, that unit tab, sorry. And any idle lava is usually going to tell us there's been inconsistent production for some reason or another. So we're going to keep an eye on that, and it looks all good for now. Looks all good for now. Okay, there's a lava or two.
There is a supply cap at some point, I remember.
Yep. Yeah, those become very obvious doing this method. So whenever you identify a general macro error, so we'll get to one in a sec, we're going to see it from the lava popping up. This is a shortcut way of finding these issues, but even if you've just got 2 or 3 lava sitting there a lot of the time, even that's a sign that we've not been quite as consistent with producing as we could be. And of course, there we go, 8 lava.
A new queen has emerged.
So there's a slight supply block on 36. We're on 4x speed, so what seems like only a few seconds actually is pretty bad. And then we had 7 lava, but we spent it pretty quickly. I mean, we can see it looks like it's reasonably consistent up to this point. 7 lavas sitting there for a few seconds unspent that time as well. We could be a little bit faster, but there haven't been any gigantic freezing up of the spending just yet.
Yeah, can I comment on this?
Yeah, of course.
So that supply block at 36, sorry, it's very common, because I used to, now I realized why, is because I got distracted by the Reaper.
Yeah.
So when they come with the Reaper, I used to always forget to build the Overlord. So now what I do now, it's actually, I know when the Reaper is coming, usually, I know that I need to remember to do that fucking 30 Overlord.
I love it. That's the way to do it. What you've done there is you've backtracked a problem. The number of people who don't get that step, dude, that's a big step. So many people, they will look at it and they'll say, I get supply blocked on 36. I need to remember to build a 36 Overlord or 30 Overlord or whatever. And that's as far as their brain goes with solving the problem. And that's the wrong mindset. What you've just done is the right mindset, because you've said, wait, why does that keep happening? Clearly just saying, remember, it's not helping. Oh, look at a replay. The Reaper's always in there at that time, isn't it? And we go, okay. So you can do that for a lot of things. Identify an individual problem. In this case, it was a 36 supply block. And what did we say? We said, Reaper is distracting us. So trigger, if the Reaper comes in, add Overlord. You know, like that's, yeah, for me, I have the same thing in my play, where if that Reaper's microing and distracting me, I build an Overlord, a drone, and a third queen while microing against the Reaper, to make sure that that all goes down. So
the third queen as well. That's right. That's also something I need to add to this. Also, the third queen sometimes I forgot because of this.
So
that's amazing. Yeah.
Depending on when it comes in, we might also be putting down our third hatch at the same time. So it might be add Overlord, might be add a third hatch, Overlord, sorry, not Overlord, we already wrote that, and third queen. So we might have to figure out our own order for what those three things happen. So next time the Reaper comes in, we've got this lovely little trigger. You've got the document open, right? You see what this little list I just wrote?
Yeah, let me just step out. Yeah, I see it. 36 supply block, Reaper, trigger, add Overlord, third hatch, third queen. Yeah. Yeah. That's it.
And we might adjust that based on our own understanding. Okay, cool. Other than that, we could see that mostly, you know, your unit tab, there was a few slight hiccups, but the next big one was, once again, not until you were being distracted, which I think was about 5-6 minutes. Let's see, when was this? So there's going to be a moment here where our lava stacks up, and it's, yeah, Reaper plus Liberator harasses us. And this is where our money starts to float a lot.
Our forces are under attack.
And basically, yeah, so whenever he distracted us is where we definitely struggled with that. So we can see here, one of the problems that we need to focus on, because we were very busy putting down the gases, is if we ever fall behind a little bit, it's so important to just drop down all those extra hatcheries, because that's part of what's going to allow your economy to keep going. So even if you drop 3 macro hatcheries in your main base, remember I was saying you should be dropping 2 every game. You know, remembering to do that is just so crucial. So for you in this game, I mean, you've got up to this nice work account, but it's definitely something where we haven't quite got that next step going just yet, where, there we go, we've just dropped a 4th base, but let's go back to looking at that 4th. How did we drop that 4th base? I think we just did it. Yep, let's go back a few seconds more. Okay.
Yeah.
So
timing. So sorry to interrupt you. I'm trying to do it. It's just the timing that sometimes is not. Well, I would say most of the time it's not correct. It's not an automatism yet. I'm trying to do it because, you know, with 2,580 minerals as it is now, like, you need the 4th and at least 2 other macro hatches. Like, it's, you know.
Yeah. So what we can do there is we can make a trigger where it's, if you ever see you're floating over 1,000 minerals after spending, like, so if you've just built a round of units and you've still got 1,000 minerals, that needs to be such a high priority, right? So what we're doing now is we're writing here, hey, wait a second, trigger. I have over 1,000 minerals after a production cycle. What's the response? Box 4 drones and build 4th base and macro hatches. So in this scenario, watch the stream. Look at what you do here. You are about to click on a single drone. There you go, build some queens. We're going to click on a drone. We click on the 4th. We build a hatch. We've still got 2,500 minerals. So there's no reason there why we couldn't have, in the same action, boxed a few drones, build hatch click, build hatch click, build hatch click, and built 3 hatcheries. With how much money you had, I would have actually gone for 3 macro hatcheries and the 4th base, just to make sure our production keeps going.
Wow.
So anytime you're above 1,000 minerals, it's like just spend the money, basically, right? It's so important, right? So this is also going to make up for us if we miss some injects a bit more than normal. And StarCraft's a game of imperfection. So, you know, if you're sitting there at, in this case, it was almost 3,000 minerals. If you build 4 hatcheries, that's 1,600 minerals. You've still got tons of minerals that we're struggling to spend. So that's actually something which is really key. So we've just got to kind of, make sure that's a nice high priority trigger there, because this is a lot of players have this issue. They're just not comfortable throwing down extra hatcheries, and they sit on thousands of minerals for a long time. The problem is if you never spend your bank, you also lose track of where your economy is at. So there's a common theme with people doing this sort of high economy build. They will first of all start out by getting to a nice work account, but they're not spending their money. And then over the next 5 minutes, they will keep losing drones, because every time they put down a structure, they lose a drone. Every time Marines get into mineral land, they lose a few drones. They're not replacing them. And they often end up at about 40 drones, and they're trying to build like ultras or something on Hive Tech, or, they're on 6 bases, but they've got such a small economy. And then at some point, they eventually catch up on spending that bank, and they've got such a shit income, and they're actually way behind. But they've almost had this illusion of being rich all game, just because there was a few thousand minerals that they never caught up on spending. So because we're really looking to just have absolute swarms of Ling Bane, if we can just prioritize getting those macro hatches down, get the fourth down, control group them all so we don't forget to use them, and then continue with everything else, like we are going to kick ass. So that's just going to be a really important thing here. Now, the other thing is we talked about the Reaper being a distraction. Well, notice how we're going to fuck up our spending every single time harassment hits us. And this is natural. But what we can do is we can focus on those points and say, how can I make this less distracting? How can I have dealt with this easier? In this case, it was just a Reaper and a Liberator, right? I don't think our opponent built any Hellions. So he actually went for very light pressure. So there's no Hellions darting around all game or anything like that. It's been pretty chill. But we didn't notice this Lib come in. So this is something where you've got pretty decent map vision. We are missing one Overlord out front, which could be annoying if Hellions came. But we've got some pretty good Overlord spread to see things coming. Now, the Reaper has distracted us a little bit. We just weren't watching the minimap. Fair enough, poo-poo happens. The Liberator came in, gets a siege. Okay, fair enough, poo-poo happens. Let's watch your camera though, and let's see how we deal with this. And this is something anytime there's harassment that throws you off, especially if you fall behind on your spending or kind of drags out distracting you. Let's look at what we do here exactly. So we've sent our Lings here, and we are microing those Lings, I believe. So it looked like we were staring at that. So if we look at that one more time, if I see a Reaper in my main, I will A-move my Zerglings, and I will look away either to spend my money or to defend other things, right? But we were kind of staring at this, right? We A-move, we A-move, we A-move. We try to pull the drones to the other side of the mineral line. We're still looking at it. We're still looking at it.
They're after my drones.
Okay. Now it's like, oh, fuck. This is happening at the 3rd. Okay, so we're going to try to queue those queens around.
New queen has emerged.
Okay, we're going to put those drones back on mining. We're going to build more drones. We're trying to keep up our production in the midst of it. We're going to inject a hatchery. Going to move queens up to the main. Oh, wait, we didn't react to the Liberator on the natural yet. Okay, so we're going to pull the drones. We're doing a pretty good job. And that Liberator should finally fall. Okay, so we can put the drones back on mining here. All right, we're going to try and inject these hatcheries. Where's that queen? There she is. Inject. We're going to start taking gases. Okay. We're then building drones. Okay, we've got some more drones that are idle. Let's put those on there. All right, all right. We're going around. We've been a little bit thrown off our rhythm. Okay, so we need to find our rhythm in the chaos. Okay, so a few things here. Number one is the highest priority after that, in hindsight, was to get the hatcheries down, since we've got the minerals. Hatcheries of production, it's going to allow us to keep that machine rolling. So we could have done the gases slightly afterwards, right? Hatcheries first. But more importantly, how can we make defending that easier? And this is going to be one of our most important things, right? Is what is our response next time? Now, you saw the Lib coming ahead of time, you didn't notice it. Shit happens, doesn't matter. I'm not going to give you a magic technique for watching your minimap better. There is no magic technique. I would argue, actually, you know what? This Overlord's poorly placed. So this Overlord is number one, it's right on the edge of the map. And Overlord has a lot of vision. So if this Overlord was here, it would still see to the end of the map. So there's no need for the Overlord to be right on the edge. Also, it's a bit far away. Personally, I would actually just have the Overlord sitting about here. Or here. So that it's going to actually... Because at the moment, there was a chance the Liberator could have come through this gap in the fog. And then we wouldn't have seen it until it got to our base. You see what I'm talking about?
Yes, I see it.
Cool. So, all right. So that's number one, is just slight adjustment. Like this Overlord here is a little bit nicer, but likewise, still very close to the edge of the map. This Overlord could be in a bit more. Just a little tip. So something you got to remember, Overlords have gigantic vision. Yeah, even this Overlord, which is a bit better placed, you can see it sees much further to the right, to the point where it's seeing well off the edge of the map. Because remember, the actual edge of the map where units can move is actually a little bit in from where the screen will move to, which is about here. So, okay, Liberator flies into our base. So it's really important to break these things down because we want there to be a set play here, so it's purely muscle memory. So I'm gonna, in your notes, I've written a little subheading, Liberator. Tab over to the notes. I want you to write down the order of operations. So literally, Liberator flies in your base, siege is up. What's the very first thing you do? And just start writing that down in dot point form.
Yeah. Let's say pull drones away.
Pull drones away. Yep. Fantastic.
Now that I think about, put down a spore outside the liberation zone.
Our drones are under attack.
Get a queen or something to shoot down the Liberator. So get queen or queens. To attack Liberator. And then eventually put back drones on gases and mineral.
I haven't organized TLO to come on the stream. People in chat asking, but for other people,
Click on the gas, remove 3. Click on the second gas, remove 3, and then
we'll get Thermal on in a few days, and then we'll find Lambo and some others. All right, so this is pretty good. This is great. I love that once you thought about it, you said, oh, I should probably put a spore down, right? Just outside of that lib zone. So let's watch on my stream again, and I'll add a few notes to it while we go, okay? Because that's a pretty damn good list. And often just rehearsing the list in your head makes it a bit more set in stone. Have you got the stream open again?
yeah.
Okay, so you go number 1,
They're after my
pull the
drones.
drones.
The enemy has emerged.
So this is what you're going to do. We're on your camera. Oh, box the drones, pull away. We don't put the spore down and we move the queens. Now, don't get me wrong, moving the queens is nice, but I like us to always do that spore straight away, like you've said. But not just that, the Liberator, we always know that Liberator, unless we're lucky and he just forgets to move, is going to go siege your natural. So I would say put a spore down outside the liberation zone, get a queen or queens to attack the Liberator, and there's a spot in between, which is put down spores at your other bases and move queens from each base to intercept. Okay? So in this scenario, you move your queens and notice how you're clicking. So watch this as well. This is a little inefficient. So we watch here one more time.
Our drones are
So notice how much click, 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 a move. So that could have been easier if we just from the start with our queens went click, shift, a move. So you right click to the side of the circle, so they're most of the way around it, and then you just a move them towards the Liberator. Does that make sense?
Right, yes, absolutely.
So shift click past the lib zone and queue up an attack move. So once we've done that, as soon as we'd given that command, we should have shifted over, built a spore in our natural, boxed the queens, moved those up here. Move to the main, build a spore, box the queens, move them up here. And then, well, by the time you've done that, don't get me wrong, the Liberator's coming in. Let's say that takes a few seconds, but your queens are already hitting this Liberator. So this Liberator dies before it gets a single shot off. And we're not even looking at it because it's muscle memory. And we know that Lib is fucked. So we've literally just placed spores, moved our queens, and what are we doing? We're putting these drones back on mining at the 3rd. So that was lower priority. Sometimes you'll see me forget to put those drones back on for 30 seconds. If there's Hellions I'm microing against at the same time, or there's 2 Liberators or something. And the thing is that a mistake? Yes. Is that me playing imperfectly? Yes. But it tells you something about the priorities, which is the priority is, deal with a lib, get each base set up, and then put the drones back. And then what would I do besides that? I'd box the drones, I'd click them on the minerals. And then what else would I do? Build hatch, click, build hatch, click, build hatch, click, build hatch, click. I would build 4 hatcheries right now. Maybe not 4. This is still not that much money, right? Let's say we build 3. 2 macro hatches and a 4th base. Sounds good. That would still put us down at 300 minerals. Plus, by the time we click all that, we've probably mined another 200 or 300 minerals. We've still got bank. But that's awesome. So this is really cool, is to do these little micro breakdowns, especially something like a Liberator. We don't need to do this for every single unit that comes in, but a Liberator, this guy is just a piece of shit. Like, the number of people I see that lose games to a single Liberator, and a big part, a big part of it is they clearly don't have an order of priorities, and it's a little bit different every time they deal with it. We want it to be really simple and clean. Now, there's something else I want to point out here, which is just a very small thing, but this Evo and Bane Nest positioning is really bad, because if Marines drop, they can get stuck behind the Evos. And if they, for instance, have +2 armor Marines with medevacs healing them, and you've only got Queens as your only range units attacking them, your Lings just can't get in there to kill them. So that's annoying. But it's also, if a Liberator siege is up here, it's kind of hard to get your Queens towards it and around behind your mineral lines. So in general, Evos, Bane Nest, tech structures, I would say the safest and best position is to kind of wedge them between your main and your natural. So this is a really nice area. Not down here, because that's easy for them to drop in and snipe it. It's in a little bit more of a central location, but it's not creating any walls, any artificial walls. Likewise, if like Adepts or Hellpats get wedged in here, you can't get around behind the mineral line to surround them with extra Zerglings. They get like these nice little nooks and corners that they can hide in. Like actually, yeah, same thing. Like if Adepts or Hellions slide up here, your Lings can only attack single file from that direction and single file from that direction. So
they're gonna get completely slaughtered.
Yeah, it's like a niche situation, but once it's happened a few times, you never want it to happen again. It's so frustrating to watch Zerglings trying to get in there. So try to avoid creating choke points, and it also limits your movement a lot. So awesome. Not a big thing, just a very small thing. But this is cool. So the 2 big things that would totally change your play here is prioritizing hatcheries and also just breaking down these little mistakes just a little bit. So let's go back as well very quickly to that very first one. The one thing I think we can always learn from watching me go over a replay with you and doing it together is how many times I'm happy to rewind and look at the same seemingly simple situation over and over again. You want to give your brain time to absorb things. You are a monkey. We are dumb monkeys. We like to think we're awesome humans and we're so smart, but realistically, we're not that smart. And we need to give us time to absorb all this vast amounts of information that we're actually having thrown our way. So be patient with yourself. So at the start here, the Reaper came in and killed a drone. Now, same thing when the Reaper came in later, you boxed all your drones and ran them away from it, which is really bad. If there's 5 Reapers, maybe that's okay. But if there's 1 Reaper, we want to do a Spore Crawler trick. Have you ever done the Spore Crawler trick or an Extractor trick? Cool.
I tried, but
Our drones are under attack.
most of the time it's even worse.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, if you pull all your drones away, you kind of give him a big boost of just doing damage to you.
Yeah.
In terms of mining time.
Not good.
Yeah, and if he gets 2 drones like this is actually a huge slowdown on your opening. Plus, he's wasted a bit of mining time. So you looked at this too late. For your speed as a player, you're never going to land the Spore Crawler trick. So if we look at this, well, surely if our Zerglings are popping on a natural, number one, we should always be building 4 Zerglings immediately. Let's double check a few things. Did our spawning pool go down on time? Why are our Zerglings so late? Why is our Queen so late? Let's check. Hatchery, does it go down right on 52 seconds, 300 minerals? The hatchery is 1.5 seconds late. Is that something that's huge? No, but I noticed it, and hopefully you can train yourself to notice it as well. Another small thing, in your main mineral line, you've got 3 workers mining a central middle patch, and there's only one worker over here trying to mine a mineral patch on its own. So that is that slight inefficiency that we hope will get evened out. But if it stays that way all game, this patch is going to mine out really fast. That one's going to mine out really slow. And the fact is that these three workers are all handicapped in terms of their efficiency, whereas one of them could be 100% efficient on that patch. So that'll slow us down just a little. Now that spawning pool looks like it went down right on time. Let me double check it. And this is something you should never stop checking in your replays once in a while, is did everything go down right on time? If you don't check it, you will get lazy. It kind of forces us to make sure we're practicing good things and not reinforcing bad habits. My friend's a music teacher, and he was... So check this out. 280 minerals when we put our spawning pool down. So we either could have had an extra drone built or delayed it. Because this was... You actually built one less drone than normal this game for what drone was building the spawning pool. Do you normally go 18 gas 17 pool or...
Yes.
Okay, so we forgot a drone here, I think. Wait. No, maybe we just started this drone a bit late. What's going on? Something weird has happened.
So let me double check with you what I usually do and I'm trying to do. So I do 18 gas and 17 pool because I want to keep the mineral line with 16 workers.
That's what I like to do as well. Yeah. Are you watching the stream? Did you see that was just 5 seconds late on starting the drone? That's what happened.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So you see that lava's just sitting there and you're at 50 minerals. You don't build it till 110. So that's why it's late. So if you fix that, if you build that on time, this makes sense, right? But you just started the drone late. So normally that's fine. You just need to fix that, right? So notice those little mistakes as much as possible. And we should, as soon as that pulls down, building drones and rallying them onto the gas. Okay. And then we're going 20 drone. I always like to go 19 overlord personally, but it's whatever floats your boat.
Yeah, we talked about it. Now sometimes I go 19 now.
It really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter as long as you're consistent. So don't mix it up. Don't do what I said I do unless you're going to do it every game and make it your normal. Okay, go back a few seconds. When the pool finished, did we actually start Zerglings immediately? Let's check. So you should normally build at least 4 Zerglings for safety. So it should be 20 supply. Yeah, so spawning pool, which was already, like we said, just slightly late because of, the drone being late. But then we built a drone there. That should be 2 Zerglings. And then these 2 Zerglings on the natural startup. Our queens still haven't started. Oof, so a little bit slow on that, right? We should be a bit tighter on spawning pool finishes, 4 Zerglings, 2 queens, bam, 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 just like that. So that's going to make our life a bit easier. Also, if you do find yourself commonly surprised by the Reaper, your Zerglings shouldn't really be going to the front of your natural. Half the time they'll go straight to your main. So you should be sitting at your ramp, right? And that way you can react to your main base or your natural, wherever the Reaper comes in. Some people even like to have the Overlord hovering over there, so that they see that and they send their second Overlord over towards their natural and third base. So these tiny details just make your life much more organized, much easier. All right. Opening. All right, so workers could be doubled up. Pool was late because drone started late, and then lings and queens delayed a few seconds extra. Okay, so those are the things that all led to that. Lings should sit on ramp in case Reaper goes straight for main. Now, in terms of your third base is consistently quite late. Same as last time we did the coaching session, because we've been focusing mostly on mechanics since then. So notice how you've got a ton of minerals. So we want to make sure we try to get that third hatch down much earlier. So I would be a big fan of you just sending one of your early drones down. So this 20th drone, which has put you up to 17 on minerals, that should have been, in my opinion, I like to send that straight to my third base so that it can just drop the third when I have the money. And that should hopefully be between 2:30 and 3 minutes, if possible, depending on how we focus on it. So I personally think that's a really nice thing to do, but you don't have to. If you find you're comfortable taking it a little bit later, that's not the end of the world. You know, prioritize your drones, your queens, your overlords. We can do that. But the important thing is to actually make sure we do all that stuff just right? To the point where if we're not taking our third yet, we want to be spending that lava non-stop, right? So what we're talking about with stopping the Reaper being annoying, spending this lava, drones, third queen straight away, you know, get the creep going, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff, really important, right? So you see in this scenario, we went third queen, but we haven't started the overlord. So we can make this your default, or we can go for a slightly faster third. Let's stick with what you're comfortable with, because I remember you were doing it this way before. So let's go third queen plus overlord plus send drone to third base. I think this should be standard, is you at least send your drone over to your third at this point. So we can chain those abilities together, where it's like, oh, okay, it's time to start a third queen. Okay, let's do that. Let's also build the overlord to avoid the 36 supply block. Because we see here, it's always this point when you start that queen that suddenly you get up to like 32, 33, 34 supply very quickly, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, because we've got 3 lava right now. So we actually could already basically be supply blocked. But if we send a drone over to the third, we're putting down a hatch that knocks us down 1 supply. We've already got the overlord building. That's going to pop in a few seconds. It means it's going to be a very small 36 supply block. So if we chain that stuff up, we're not floating these minerals. Now, I noticed you also never pulled off gas in this game and completely forgot link speed for a very long time. That's just a mistake because of the Reaper, right? Normally you are pulling off gas?
Yes, so what I do is the following, correct me if...
A new queen has
good.
emerged.
I control group 6, 2 drones from the gas, as they are still larva stage. Sorry, not larva, like cocoon stage. And then as soon as I hit 100, I press 6, I send it to the natural, and start link speed. And then at 330, usually they're still there. I can put them back.
That's awesome. I like that. I love just a little thing like that. You're like, oh yeah, it just makes it easy so I don't have to box them. Cool. Good shit, man. All right, keep following that, and that'll be great.
Yeah, now lately I'm doing it. This game I didn't. Yeah, there it was a bit clusterfuck, I would say. But,
no worries. I mean, we're kind of skipping you ahead a little bit because you're quite an organized player. So realistically, if I wanted to give you more success right now at your level with this build, I could make your build infinitely easier by just making it so you never pull guys off gas. You just put 2 on gas from the start of the game and you just leave it like that all game. Because then it's going to help make up for the fact that, you know how it's a bit awkward getting all your other gases? It's just going to make sure you have a little bit of extra gas to make up for that. But we're not going to do that for you because I think I've got faith in you as a player who I think will be getting to Diamond 3 and then hopefully Diamond 2 in the next few months, maybe less. Maybe, it all depends how much time we have to dedicate to the game, right? Talking in terms of weeks or months is useless. It's more about, how many games we put in, and it's never linear progress, right? You stay at the same level, feels like you're not improving. But if you're focused and you're actually working on individual things, suddenly over the course of 10, 20 games, you jump 300 MMR, just like that. And you go, what the fuck? How did this happen? And it's all that work finally manifesting. It's the layers of muscle memory settling in your brain, becoming automatic, and suddenly you're able to just play all those things you've been working at for such a long time, right? It's a real slow burn.
Absolutely. Can I ask you something regarding this? Because
yeah.
I noticed that I've been dying a lot to some early pushes. So I started to use like the spotter and also some changelings to go layer and then use a overseer and send some changelings to just take a look.
Our drones are under attack.
What I still have troubles is after you saturate your natural. Sometimes they still catch me off guard. I don't have enough units, and sometimes I just die because I'm just droning like crazy.
So can you describe the exact unit set that you're looking at that they're coming in with?
Usually Marines, yeah.
So are we talking like Marines and 2 medevacs usually, like with stim?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we're talking about is the 2-1-1. So this is a very particular build, which we'll learn to identify very easily, okay? So this is one of the most common builds you'll face. So the 2-1-1, do you have any idea why it's called the 2-1-1?
because you open. I scout it. I learn now to scout it, but still I need to get better. So basically, go to barracks, factory, and then starport.
Yeah.
Because
And-
now I also
We have
also
met the
recognize
enemy
when
in
they go barrack, reactor, factory.
Our
Usually they
forces
come
are
with
under
aliens.
attack.
Then they swap the barrack with the reactor, and then they come with aliens usually.
Yeah.
It's
With the more normal Hellion builds where they'll go with Battlecruiser or Liberator or Viking or Banshee with the Hellions. Yeah. And it's very different to the... So those builds have more prolonged aggression, more flexible aggression. Whereas the Medivacs, the 2-1-1, it's much more one sharp, hard-hitting timing. And if you're playing someone who's very good, they might then just go into non-stop drops. Usually if they're doing that at your level, it means their macro is absolute arse. So just, try to hang on and try to keep respreading creep and defending and surviving. And usually their transition is very slow. So I've linked you the build order guide for that build, just so you can understand exactly what the build is. Do you know,
Yes, yeah.
off the top of your head, what timing do you think they hit you with the Marines? What time in the game timer do you think they'll arrive at your base?
Oof, I don't know. I don't remember. Usually when I'm still saturating my third.
So what game timer do you think that is roughly?
Mineral
Just take a guess. I know it's totally fine to be wrong. It's just good to put ourselves out there and start guessing. It'll make us remember it a lot better.
5 minutes.
About 5 minutes. Okay, so about 5:20 is kind of the timing. Now people are often going to hit you. Plat 1, more likely to hit
has emerged.
usually about 5:45, sometimes later than that. Okay.
Alright, I see.
Depending on how tight they are, right? Because you will occasionally get a pro hitting. Usually they'll only have 13 or 14, not the full 16 Marines at 5 minutes and 5 seconds. But that requires the map to not be too big and them to do a very, very nicely executed version of the build. 5:20 is the more standard pro timing for it. So we're going to say, okay, so as a general rule, start pumping units
They're after my drone.
from 5 minutes. Now, the way we defend it is simply
We have met the enemy in combat.
Queens
Our
up
drones
front.
are under attack.
they focus fire the Medivacs.
Our forces are under
Lings
attack.
engage when the Marines run
They're
forward
after my drones.
to fight the Queens. Let's say focus fire Medivacs if possible. If the Medivacs are too far back, you don't want to be like move commanding Queens into Marines. That's very bad. But Lings engage when the Marines come forward to fight Queens. If Marines pull back off creep and stutter step, disengage, especially with your Lings. If you just A-move Lings at the Marines and don't get a full surround, they will be able to kill a lot of Zerglings. But you can defend it with just Queens and Zerglings.
Our
Yeah.
forces are under attack.
Okay. So you don't need to have Banes ready
Nope.
at that point.
There's players in low GM who still rely on Banelings every game, but these are players who don't macro properly at the start of the game. Like they never have a proper Queen count. That's why these are players who are very cheesy aggressive Zergs who they don't ever build their Queens early enough. So if they tried to defend with Queen Ling, they would have like 3 Queens and 1 transfuse at most between them. For us, let's go take a look in this game. 5:30 or so. So our natural's slightly oversaturated. We could move a few drones to our third. Not the end of the world though. But we can see if we started pumping, like we already built a lot of Zerglings this game, which we didn't need. Our opening was very sloppy and could be tightened up, right? But let's say our opponent hits 5:45, 6 minutes, that sort of period. They're doing it with no third command center. If they've got a 2-on-1, it's like a real committed attack, okay? So we definitely could defend. How many Queens? We got 5 Queens. So yeah, I mean, we should have more Queens by this point. We could also have, more Zerglings, and we'd be totally fine against it. Generally, you want to have 30 plus Zerglings. Usually you go up to about 40 Zerglings, and then you go back to droning even while you're defending it. Yeah, so even though it requires quite a bit of micro to defend, once you've got, 4 or 5 Queens up front, 30 plus Zerglings, you can go back to droning and you should be okay. In terms of how we scout it, let's go back to your scouting in this game. And let's look at this as a standard thing. Do you have an overlord sacrifice timing that you use to sacrifice this overlord in?
So this game I don't remember because
In general, though, just game plan wise, like is there something you have in your head as like the idea where you want to do?
Yes, so I'll tell you what to do. The first overlord goes directly to the natural.
Yeah.
To see whether they are expanding, right? Because most of the time, before doing this, they were cheesing me, and they were doing a one base all-in, and I was basically dying all the time. So I started to put one overlord, and then usually I would scout the ramp too, and then either it would die or I would retreat it to like
the pillar.
High ground. The pillar, yeah. And then the second overlord stays on a natural, and then it leaves the natural. Most of the time, like I replace it somewhere, or I send it for a second scout. But usually, I replace it in the entrance to the turret or the natural.
Yep. Okay, and with this first overlord, so you said you used to sacrifice it in about 2 minutes. Did you say?
Yeah. Well, when it gets usually in the beginning, yes. When it gets there. And
yeah. So I think there's a really simple thing we can do, which is send it in at 4 minutes every game and just see what it can see. And I get it kind of is annoying to give up vision over their natural, but realistically, we don't see that much here anyway. And if you go through this middle area where their production is, this is the most important area. This is always it, right? Because their add-ons are always swapping around, so you will see everything. So if you send... Oh, thank you very much for the subs, by the way, guys. Sorry, big thank you. Batistea and Our Cow and Lyle. Thank you, guys. Much love. Yeah, so basically, normally you'd come in and you would see no later than about 3:30 at the very latest, the factory would have swapped onto this reactor at the start. Now, your opponent's doing a super weird build where he would die to any Bane Burst or Ravager Ling attack because there's no Hellions to deal with Zerglings and there's no tank or anything like that, right? So this is a little bit of an oddball build, but you'll see this more and more below Diamond, right? Lots more kind of different ways of getting up that tech tree. Yeah, it's a little exposed, but he's got a bunker, right? If you just do a light pressure, he's fine. So in this case, we see 3 barracks, a factory, a starport. So this is essentially, it's like a 2-1-1, but with a different build order that seems a little bit more made up by the player, right? Because normally you'd see a lot more Marines out by now, and you'd kind of have the stim coming at a similar timing, but it would be more like, oh, okay, there's already a big Marine count out. The 2 medevacs start, they join up with the Marines, they boost across the map, they hit a really tight timing. In this case, there's going to be more production because there's 2 barracks with reactors, but those aren't going to start producing until about the time when a 2-1-1 should almost be ready to leave the base. So this is a very different version where it's more of a slow build up. Looks a little bit more kind of like my beginner opening, but they've swapped the first reactor for a tech lab, which has kind of changed the order of the unit production a little bit. But either way, basically, let's simplify our information. Rather than understanding everything we see, we want every piece of scouting, especially a set early scouting, to be looking for 2, if possible, we want to split it into 2 things, right? Really, really obvious categories. Hellions or Marines in this case. Yeah, Greed is also a good one. So that's something we'll talk about as well. Greed okay, so 4 minutes, always go in over the top of the main ramp, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So there's 2 things we're looking for, Marines or Hellions, okay? Right? So basically, what's on the reactor on the ramp? So if it's Hellions, then they can be aggressive straight away, right? Yeah, that's the factory on it. So they can be, mobile harassment, air units, like BCs, etc. So what do we need? 4-minute 30 Spore Crawler at each base to be safe. Because we know there could be a Liberator or something like that. Hey, guess what? If we'd built a 430 Spore this game, we'd be fine for this Liberator. This is obviously a build though where there weren't Hellions, so we would never have built that ahead of time. But if this was a Hellion build, which is much more standard with the Liberator, we would have already had a Spore here, and this Liberator would have died very quickly. Okay?
Yeah, because I was watching also some other videos, coaching, and remember like when you see aliens coming, then put down spores, because at 430 you potentially would have like some flying units to harass you, like Liberator, BC, or Banshees.
Exactly.
At least what I understood.
Yeah, I think that's with the, and if you see Marines down here, you see the barracks, just assume this is a 2-1-1. From 5 minutes, pump 30 to 40 lings with your queens, and then go back to mining. Go back to pumping out drones. Now that's a very safe generalized response. It's actually the wrong response for this scenario, because he's not going to be ready to push us until like 7 minutes or later. But if we build 30 Zerglings, does it slow down our drones? Yes. Is it the end of the world? No. Because
also his build is a bit inefficient. So
exactly. That's exactly it. People get too worried about, oh, I'm overreacting, but then he didn't even commit to it. And it's like, no, it's fine. Especially because if you tighten your build up, by 5 minutes, we can easily have over 50 drones, which is having our third mineral line or most of the way saturated. So we're still mining a crazy amount of minerals. We can still be getting up our fourth base, our macro hatches, while building those Zerglings. Adding the gases, maybe our upgrades and stuff are a little bit delayed because we're building the Zerglings. That's okay. Doesn't matter too much, right? We've still been mining a lot more minerals than our opponent. We've been mining 3 mineral lines versus 2 the whole time. Big mineral advantage. That's a big Zergling advantage. It's a big hatchery production advantage. It kicks ass, okay? So that's going to be awesome, man. So these are some really good rules that we're getting here. Sacrifice, figure out which one of those two it is, react that way. We've got the opening rules for tightening things up. We've got some rules for addressing problems like this and writing a little reaction list, an order of operations where it's every single action in order. And I think you did a great job of that with the Liberator entering the base. And remember, I just added a few details from my own experience, but that's something you can do as well, right? So if you wrote down what we were talking about earlier with the Liberator, put down the Spore, we also would have, if you then rewatched the fight after writing it down, you would have been like, hey, wait a second, why did this Liberator get in the natural and get damage done? That I could have moved those queens. So then you can rethink the order, and you can do kind of what we did there, where we said, wait a second, don't just, get your queens to attack the Liberator, cue them to attack the Liberator, and immediately move your other queens onto the edge. You know the Liberator will rotate here, you move your queens to that edge. You know it might go straight past into the main, you move the queens up to the edge. So anytime you kind of planning for the eventuality, it's going to be huge, right? The number of players out there who get their build ruined by a probe building a pylon in their natural, so they can't build a hatchery. And like they're attacking the probe and they're on 400 minerals, and they're attacking the probe and they're on 550 minerals, and then the probe puts the pylon down and the Zerg just, their brain explodes. Whereas once you watch that replay, the moment you see a probe, you assume your hatchery is going to get blocked, and you have a set play. Okay, drop my pool, drop my gas, maybe send the drone to the third base to build the hatchery there, blah, blah. You have a set play, and you're doing it straight away. Yeah. But the moment
I usually send it right away to the third.
Exactly. And that's what you've got to do, right? Because if you're waiting for them to do the good harassment and then you're responding to it, you're like, I hope he doesn't do the good micro. It's just, you're setting yourself up for a bad time, right? So this will be huge. Okay, cool. So in this game, we never got on top of that spending because we never prioritized those hatcheries. And that was a big issue for us. You'll notice this Overlord in the top right, we never really replaced, which is a real shame because we do have a big gap in our vision. And we also didn't notice the medevacs flying in. Now, notice how your opponent's playing pink here on a white background. So I want you to go to your player's camera. So go to number 2. Oh, wait, you can't do that. Sorry. Okay, what's important? Because you're not in the replay right now, are you?
No.
Okay, so if you, in-game, are seeing the minimap like this, that's fucked. There is a button next to your minimap that changes the colors, okay? So notice how when I'm in your player camera, right now the enemy is showing up as pink. That's really bad. So I'm not sure if this is just because I'm observing, but you'll notice here, if I go in my color menu, I always make it so my enemy is red on the minimap. Really stands out on every single map. And yeah, and even if the settings are turned on here, if you're not on this overlay, there's a button next to the minimap where you can turn that on and off. So when you're in a normal game, anyone watching, there's a button. There's one to turn off terrain on the minimap, which obviously makes it easier to see dots moving, but I hate it because I'd much rather see the terrain so I can see the ridges and everything. I need to see that. But the more important one is the color button. So try toggling that on and off, because some people accidentally switch that without realizing. It's really bad. But if you're ever playing a competitive game and your opponent is showing up as pink on a snow map, you will not notice their drops coming. This happened to me on Polar Night way back when a lot of the time. It happened in a tournament once and I got really angry and I made sure it never happened again, which is how most of my improvements in my play happen, is I get very angry and I change something in the system of my play. It's good motivation. So yeah, be aware of that. So as much as I said earlier, you know, I'm not going to come up with any magic rules for spotting things coming our way. There are some things we can do. So yeah, as well, if you struggle against drops a lot, you play people who drop a lot, like if maybe you're playing customs with this guy, he always drops a lot, you can just throw down spores. It's totally fine for you to just put down spores. Just remember to put them on the edges. So for instance, like with this creep tumor in your main, I would have had that over here and spreading, because I would want spore, 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 spore. So that if a drop comes in, it's just going to die. I like having 2 spores right on the edge of the map where nothing can fly past it. Likewise up here, I'd try to put a creep tumor there. Spore, spore. It's a bit obsessive. Maybe you can just go spore there or something like that. But you don't want to allow them to get around the edges into the back line. Anytime they get around the edges into the back line, you end up in a lot of trouble. So don't be afraid to drop spores once you're up at 4 bases. You know, I'm not saying build them at 3 minutes into the game, but once you've got 4 by 5 bases down, you're on 65 plus workers, you're like, oh, you know what do I always struggle with against Terran? Drops. Let's just sprinkle a few spores across my bases, especially on the outside edges where everyone tends to drop from. If someone drops through the middle of your base, it's not a big problem. Your Zerglings are always standing next to that point. You've got more queens there. You've got more time to see it coming. It's really just zoning out those side flanks with spore crawlers that makes your life a lot easier. So that's definitely something you can start doing, because I've been watching a lot of TVZ lately, and I've noticed a lot of Terran players are completely incapable of doing a frontal push, right? And they're only winning by basically dropping and expanding and waiting until the Zerg gets angry enough to attack into a planetary fortress with 5 siege tanks behind it. So it's this funny thing where Zerg players are unable to defend drops and Terran players are unable to do a direct push due to the micro and the multitasking capabilities of both players.
Actually, I noticed like when I lose in ZvT, most of the time it's because they lead me dry. Keep harassing me.
It's just the harassment, right? Yeah, liberators keep coming in, drops keep coming in.
Exactly, and then they keep going, and then eventually decide to push when they max out.
And you're already so far behind at that point.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, in this game, we can also go back here now because we took so long to get set up on those bases. I haven't mentioned it yet, but we never set up map control. Right now, there is a single Marine controlling the watchtower. And this is an absolute goddamn travesty. To let one Marine control the watchtower, this is... Oof. Like, as a Zerg player, no.
I would say he's almost as bad as having a Mac, right?
Pretty much, yes.
Almost.
This is 5,000 minerals in the bank. This guy sitting right here, that's us having 5,000 unspent minerals right there. I have I don't know if you've ever heard this. There's an Australian ex-pro player, does a bit of commentary, still streams every now and then, not as much as he used to, called Death. And in the early days of Wings of Liberty, for several years, I remember because he was just a guy who came from Brood War and he was all about just macroing and he loved playing as pure biomacro, and he would constantly send out individual or pairs of Marines to spot all over the map. And I was like, well, you can do this in TVT, but you can't do this in TVZ. Like, I've got Zerglings. They're just better for this. Like, you have to stop wasting Marines. And it worked for him because he just had better macro. And he could efficiently send all these scouts all over the map, and the Zerg players struggled mechanically to keep clearing them up, right, without letting him get the vision. And I remember this thing where I was like, God damn, he's putting an APM tax on me. But it actually was not efficient. It was very, very inefficient. I just remember specifically this feeling of stress as Zerg going, what the fuck? You're not meant to be sending Marines on the map. Like they get slaughtered, man. Zerglings are way better for this. So this is something where, you know, we should have been stabilized at this point and saying, hey, I've got most of my tech ready. I've got most of my shit done, right? So if we fix up those early mistakes by 8 minutes in the game, this point, our game plan should be simplified. Because our 4th and 5th hatch should already be down, our macro hatches, they should all be control grouped. We should have our Hydroden, most of our upgrades started, right? Our lair should probably be done by now. We don't need these last 3 queens you're building. So you've already got plenty of queens at this point, by the way, but you're still pumping queens, so we're a bit slow to shift into the next stage of the game. But the important thing is the game plan should be simple. We've got all our tech down. We've got all our bases down. All we should be doing is inject, build Zerglings, build Overlords.
And spread creep.
Spread creep, send Zerglings for map control, set up backstabs, run-bys, drop defense, inject, build Zerglings, build Overlords, spread creep. And then do shit with your army. Inject, build Zerglings, build Overlords, spread creep, do shit with your army. So it's very simple macro-wise from that point. There's a lot of spending, there's a lot of holding down the Zergling hotkey, but your micro and the activity that you should be achieving with your army becomes more complex. You might be boxing some Zerglings, space barring them or caps locking them, and queuing them down, bam, to attack into the 3rd base. You might be boxing some, space barring them into your main as a drop defense squad. So you say, remember the standard drop formation? Main base is on one side, covering that front. Drop defense is on the opposite side. And if one of the bases in between gets attacked, you know, your army can kind of respond, right?
Yes.
Because there's always one part of your army, your drop defense or your main army, that's kind of close by, right? But at this point, we should have Zerglings there. We should have Zerglings on this base, on this base, on this base, you know, all over the map, right? We should be in the driver's seat, kind of doing that sort of stuff, right? So it's just one of those things where if we can clean up the earlier stages, what does that lead to? How does it make the rest of the game look different? It makes it look different because at this point, you've got absolute map control. You're spreading creep like a madman. You're maybe getting Lingbane run-bys ready. Big one I'm a fan of. You know, 12 Banelings, 40 Zerglings just chilling here. And the moment he's dropping me or pushing me on the map, I will just move them to my opponent's natural. Now, in this case, you might be like, oh, he's got 2 Widowmines. Maybe you've played a meta with this player. You know he always has Widowmines. You know what you do with that big clump of Lingbane? You box 4 or 5 Zerglings. You click them half a screen in front, even before you send them in. So you've got most of the Lingbane chilling here. You've boxed 4 or 5 Zerglings there. So when you move it, the Widowmines will all fire on the first 4 or 5 Zerglings.
Yes.
And not hit your army. And that little adjustments like that can be made, right? Yeah, I'm a big fan of the defensive Widowmines for stopping Lingbane run-bys, because a lot of Zergs, once they take one bad Widowmine hit, are like, oh, can't do run-bys in this game ever again. And as a Terran, I'm like, thank fucking God, you know, like, please trick yourself into thinking one bad Widowmine hit means you can't do run-bys. Because I'll tell you, as a Terran player, it's nothing more nightmarish than a Zerg who actually knows how to constantly attack from multiple angles. It's very mechanically demanding to defend, both as the Zerg or the Terran. This matchup is very much an APM tug of war, right? You can queue Liberators into your opponent's base and do no damage. And do you know why it ends up being worth it? Because at a certain point, the Zerg is going to fuck up because they're like, God damn it, stop queuing Liberators into my base. This happened to a 6.5k Zerg by the name of Vanya from Russia in Nation Wars. It was on Thunderbird against the Riddler, the guy who spends all day pretending to be a Villo, the Canadian memer. And he literally, I think it was his like 12th Liberator that went in, and most of them had killed an average of like 2 drones or no drones and just a little bit of mining time. And then his 12th Liberator came in and it killed like 23 drones while Hellions dove into a mineral line and killed another 16.
Oh God,
And then because Vanya was kind of reeling from that, the next Liberator got another 10. And it like literally before that, it was like 5 minutes of near perfect Zerg defense. And then eventually his units got in. Now, this is obviously Vanya's a much better player than Riddler, and he was playing a bit too overly safe and was also like zero experience against someone doing something so crazy, and Riddler was doing a massive gamble. If Vanya went for any Nidus, any Ravager Ling attack, any Roach Speed attack, Riddler was dead. He had no defensive units. He was only building Hellions and Liberators, nothing that actually stands its ground in a fight. He was gambling
Just
really
harassment.
hard. Yeah, he was
Harassment, yeah.
big gamble, but it showed the power of the fact that at a certain point that APM tax will break someone's brain. Like, you know, and just even in a standard ZvT, just queuing up these problems, these drops, like, you know, this is a very common thing. The Terran micros their drops, sits at home in a defensive position and lets, you know, you fuck up. But once we set up some of these systems in place, once we get this, you know, spending going a lot earlier. So, I mean, if you'd even been able to spend your money at this point, you could have won the game, right? So what's 4,000 minerals in Zerglings? It's 40 times 4. It's 160 Zerglings. So if we had 160 extra Zerglings, maybe make another 30 or 40 into Banelings, and you just A-moved the natural and the third at the same time, you win this game. He can't stand his ground. You could be almost maxed out right now on Zerglings and Banelings. So if we can just get on top of that money, you know, it's going to make a huge difference for you as a player. So what are the biggest things as we finish up, since we are out of time?
Oh, yeah.
No worries. We've gone a bit over, but that's okay. Good sesh. One of the biggest things here, prioritize those hatcheries and remember the action. In that game, you went, oh, I got to do the next part. You clicked a drone. You clicked and you built a hatch. No. Box 4 drones. Build hatch, click, build hatch, click, build fourth base, click. All in one go. That's got to be one big action because you're always going to float money with this build. And remember what I told you when we first learned this build? It's natural to be floating 2,000 minerals basically for the entire game with this build. Until you get better at it, until you get more experience. Problem there is you're floating 4,000 the entire game. And even if you do float 2,000, I'm hoping we can at least at some points dip down to 3, 4, 500 minerals. Even if it's just for a few seconds and it shoots right back up. If we can start cutting into that mineral spending, it's going to make a huge difference. And I tell you, just getting those hatcheries early is going to be huge. These tiny details in your opening, getting those drones started on time is going to be big.
Also the third, it's way later usually in my build. So
yeah,
I think your suggestion will already improve a lot actually.
So I guess what you want to do is obsess over tightening the opening, right? First 4 minutes.
Yeah.
And past that, prioritize the hatcheries. 2 times macro hatch plus fourth base. Like
You
I've put,
start
yeah.
later, sorry, just a question. You start later, put down the gases, right?
Yeah. I like to do it at the same time as Evo Chambers and Bane Nest, just all at once. Lair, double Evo, Bane Nest. And that's usually just after the gases. Now, it's up to you exactly what the trigger is there. The important thing, as you get better at the build, you'll do it a bit faster and faster. But it's like, it's just not high priority. So the rule there is, after you take your gases and you drop those extra hatcheries down, then you go for double Evo, Bane Nest, Lair, etc. So usually, because you've got so much money, that happens all in a very short window of time. So it could technically be drop the hatches, Evos, Bane Nest, and then take the gases if you want to do it that way. I just want you to come up with a set rule and follow it every game. So what do you think is your rule for when you want to go for those Evos, the Bane Nest, and the Lair?
All together, yeah.
But do you want to do that after the gases, before the gases? Is it going to be hatcheries first? And I think hatcheries should always be a priority, right?
I think at this point, hatcheries first, since it's like a big problem so far. So I would say hatcheries first, and then take gases, and then put down 2 Evo Chambers, Bane Nest, install the layer.
Awesome.
And then once the layer is done, just put down the Hydra then. Yeah.
Okay, I've wrote it down in the top at homework in the top of your document. So awesome, man. Dude, this should give us some leaps and bounds here. Just keep tightening it up, keep kicking ass. Since this is such a macro focused build, if you want to give yourself some momentum, some fun, some control, feel free to play a very cheesy build in Zerg vs Zerg or another matchup. So you can have, okay, this is the God macro matchup. This other one, maybe Zerg vs Zerg, you're just doing a big Ling Bane all-in attack or something. I'll give you
I usually go for macro. I'm a defense, so I usually go for macro builds. But I'm learning how to defend them. Like now I don't die as much as in cannon rushes, for example.
What about
Link
for
floods.
yeah?
Yeah, link floods. I'm learning how to actually wall the natural and block with queen. Like I'm learning all these things now.
Okay, I would if you're keen to learn Ling Bane micro, there's a build suggestion in the document. If you're continuing to just play gasless, just stick with what you're doing. It's up to you. But if you do want a nice, it's a macro opening that just goes into a dedicated Ling Bane all in. That's linked there for you. But we're out of time. Got to run, man. So
All right.
I hope you enjoy your weekend. I hope you get a lot of time to ladder and kick some ass. And yeah.
Thank you very much for everything.
No worries. If I don't see you before Christmas, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and talk to you soon, mate.
Yeah, ciao.
Ciao. Awesome. Okay, guys, hopefully you got something out of that coaching session. Thanks for watching. Big thank you, Soul Steel, for the 55-bit cheer. And of course, Our Cow and Batistea for the subs. I appreciate it. Thank you, guys. If you're interested in more coaching, check out the coaching playlists. Keep an eye on the channel. We try to put as many of these up as we can. GG's.